All right. Thank you, everyone. It is my honor to introduce our next guest. We have Ms. Raina Thiele, who is the Senior Advisor to the Secretary for Alaska Affairs and Strategic Priorities with the Department of the Interior. Ms. Thiele, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us today.
So for those who don't know who I am Raina Thiele. I currently serve as the Senior Advisor to the Secretary of the Interior for Alaska Affairs. Folks often ask me, what does that mean? And essentially what I do is handle the policy for Alaska for the Department of the Interior overall. So that means the land management portfolio, the tribal affairs portfolio, which actually comprise over half of what the Department of the Interior does. So that means, National Park Service lands, BLM lands, refuge lands. Those are all over half of the department's portfolio in each of those lands categories. And so for my position, it really is important to have an Alaskan there who is present, who is able to advise senior staff and the secretary on basically all things Alaska. And I, in particular, kind of bring a unique perspective to this position as the first Alaska Native person to hold this post. My family is from Future Bay Native Village and Alexander Creek, and we have a very deeply embedded family history in the Bristol Bay region, both as commercial and as subsistence fishermen over many generations. And so it's really my honor to be here today to speak with you about the Department of the Interior and the Secretary of the Interior's commitment to ensuring a thriving and secure Alaska. First, I'd like to talk a little bit about what our department brings to this conversation. I think some folks probably wonder, what is the Department of the Interior doing here talking about defense issues? But the department bureaus provide scientific research and on-the-ground connections to support and inform the federal government's understanding of global strategic trends and the national security implications of a changing climate. We value, encourage, and derive considerable benefit from international, federal, state, tribal, local, and stakeholder partnerships and outreach, which address a diverse range of issues in Alaska and the North American Arctic. As many of us know, our partners at NOAA have determined the Arctic is warming faster than elsewhere on Earth, which itself is unlike anything recorded on modern instrumentation. Studies and reports indicate a long-term warming trend has and will substantially amplify extreme events such as floods, storm surges, droughts, forest fires, as many folks in your area know, glacial retreat, sea level rise, thawing permafrost, species redistribution, and changes in ocean and atmospheric composition and circulation. So basically, across the board, will be impacting and is currently impacting the way of life in Alaska. These effects, particularly in combination with other environmental stresses and human activities, will continue to significantly impact and exacerbate the social, political, economic, and security challenges faced by the US and the international community over the coming years. Straining physical infrastructure, contributing to economic and trade instability, increasing competition and tension over Arctic resources, and hindering our ability to innovate, manage, and support. For example, international disputes over fishing rights and access will heighten adverse impacts to marine fish populations caused by ocean warming and acidification. This will increase the incentive for illegal and unregulated fishing for countries, and it will also impact the fish stocks for local communities and indigenous communities that rely heavily on fishing for food and for income. And this is particularly true as species migrate out of established fishing grounds and go elsewhere. These tensions will be compounded with constraints on food production from local deficiencies in arable land, water, and energy, and from reduced precipitation. While the Arctic has historically been a region of low-intensity international cooperation, increasingly accessible resources and navigable sea routes could upend these dynamics. For instance, in August of 2019, Russia and China participated in the first sale and shipment of Arctic crude to Asia via the unusually ice-free Northern Sea Route. And both countries have invested billions in outer continental shelf development and marine infrastructure over the past several years. In 2013, the White House released its national strategy for the Arctic region, setting forth the federal government's strategic priorities for the dynamic and rapidly changing Arctic region. This recognized that there with an undisciplined approach in the Arctic frontier, this could result in significant harm to the region and could also impact national security interests. The national security strategy included a set of priorities, which several in this room may have seen and may have even worked on, to respond effectively to emerging risks and opportunities in this unique environment. Those included advancing our national security interests, pursuing responsible Arctic region stewardship, and of course, strengthening our international cooperation. It also committed to safeguarding peace and stability in the Arctic region, utilizing the best information for decision-making, emphasizing the use of innovative arrangements, and underscoring the importance of consulting with Alaska Native communities. The department completed a series of assigned tasks under this 2013 national strategy, and this work corresponds with the department's domestic responsibilities for scientific research, conservation, sustainable development, and engagement with and support of Indigenous communities. This is in addition to the international work that is supported, of course, by the State Department. Implementation efforts have been very active over the years, including currently, which is to, in part, identify best practices for collaboration among experts to improve efficiency, consistency, and of course, transparency of management efforts. For one example, our Bureau of Ocean and Energy Management regularly integrates traditional, local, and Indigenous knowledge and science into resource management decisions, and is also an active participant in several coordinating bodies furthering strategic goals for the U.S. Arctic. And some of those groups are the North Slope Science Initiative, the Interagency Arctic Research Policy Committee, to name just a couple. Implementation efforts also include coordinating federal resources to assist high-risk communities and provide information to cities and villages on risk management and coastal and riverine resilience in Alaska. So, for example, the Jeanette Lake Commission completed its Village Infrastructure Program and catalog of federal programs to assist communities threatened by erosion, flooding, and permafrost degradation, and to mitigate the impacts of these threats with respect to human health and safety and the protection of key infrastructure. The Department of the Interior is keeping close tabs on this effort that is mostly driven by the White House and with other agency colleagues as the discussion about the Arctic heats up and continues to progress. But rest assured that within the Biden administration, there is a very strong focus on the Arctic and on how to ensure that we have thriving communities and a safe and peaceful environment. Another strategic priority for the administration, which I'd like to speak a little bit about, came in the form of a February presidential executive order, which directed a whole of government approach to assessing vulnerabilities in and strengthening the resilience of critical supply chains. Stemming from that effort, the Biden-Harris administration has already begun to take steps to address supply chain vulnerabilities. These efforts are critical because as the COVID pandemic and resulting economic crisis have shown, structural weaknesses in both domestic and international supply chains do threaten America's economic and national security. While amplified by the public health and economic crisis, decades of underinvestment led to fragile supply chains across a range of sectors and products. Unfair trade practices by competitor nations and domestic policy inefficiencies really have undermined the U.S. industrial base, siphoned innovation from the U.S., and really stifled wage and productivity growth. So pursuant to this executive order, the administration is crafting strategies for 6 industrial bases that underpin America's economic and national security. These will be completed within 1 year, and these supply chain reviews will reinforce the need for the transformative investments proposed in the President's American Jobs Plan. The issue of supply chain resilience applies to Alaska and also offers opportunities to engage. For instance, one of the pillars of this effort is to invest in sustainable domestic and international production and processing of critical minerals. The Department of the Interior, with the support of the White House Science and Technology Policy Office, along with USDA and EPA, will be creating a working group, which is composed of agency colleagues across the board, and they will be tasked with identifying sites where critical minerals could be produced and processed in the U.S. while adhering, of course, the highest environmental, labor, and sustainability standards. This working group will collaborate with the private sector, with states, tribal nations, Alaska Native corporations, and stakeholders, including labor, impacted communities, and environmental justice leaders. And the goal is really to expand sustainable, responsible critical minerals production and processing in the US. The last priority I'd like to touch on is the recently issued report entitled Conserving and Restoring America the Beautiful, which focuses on protection of 30% of US lands and oceans. Now, I've received a lot of questions about this initiative. I've also received a lot of positive feedback. But I think what I'd like to say first and foremost about this initiative is that it is one that seeks to empower communities. The President's National Conservation Goal provides an opportunity to better honor and support the people and communities who serve as stewards of our land and our waters, rather than simply measuring conservation progress by kind of the typical mechanisms, national parks, wilderness lands, marine protected areas. The President's vision recognizes and really celebrates the voluntary conservation efforts of a range of different folks, farmers, ranchers, forest owners, the leadership of sovereign tribal nations, contributions and stewardship of America's hunters, anglers, and fishing communities, and of course, the vital importance of recreational spaces. The President's challenge is a call to action, really, to support tribally led and locally led conservation and restoration efforts of all kinds and all over America. Wherever communities wish to safeguard the lands and waters they know and love, doing so will not only protect our lands and waters, but also boost our economy and support jobs nationwide. The central recommendation of this America the Beautiful report is that the pursuit of a decade-long national conservation effort be faithful to 8 core principles. These principles, which include a commitment to collaboration, support for voluntary and locally led conservation, and honoring tribal sovereignty and private property rights. But these are all essential ingredients to building and maintaining broad support, enthusiasm, and trust for this effort. And these principles are also indispensable to achieving durable outcomes that meaningfully improve the lives of Americans and of Alaskans. I'd like to thank the organizers of this event again, Mayor Ward and Borough leadership for having me here today. If you would like to reach out to the department, which I 100% encourage, I'd be happy to hear from you. The organizers of this event have my contact information, and they are welcome to share with anyone who would like to talk through the department's goals and priorities. I'm always happy to connect with folks and have a conversation. So I appreciate you all listening today and appreciate being here. Thank you.